Hi, I'm G. Welcome to my art channel, and this is my drawing of the Pokemon Palkia using markers. So after drawing it out, I decided to ink all the line work using Copic multiliners on 250 GSM Bristol board, and then that is my motley collection of markers that I use to colour the whole thing in. Now this Pokemon is mostly white or light grey, but I had them holding a really sort of big ball of pink energy, so I decided what I would do is do the sort of all the shadow areas and all of the grey areas on this figure. I would do them all with a base colour of this kind of pink that I have called Sorbet first of all. So anything that was going to be in any way dark had a base coat of Sorbet. After that, I decided to add some different colours, some of the darker purple areas using a flex marker called Wild Orchid. So for the purple areas, I was going to use 3 colours, but this was my very first layer, my base layer, Wild Orchid. And I decided to do the markers on this picture in layers instead of blending them. I think because of the very extreme light source in the center, and I was a bit sort of like apprehensive about how I was going to deal with that, I decided that I would go with layers because I thought that would give me a much more kind of stark effect of light hitting the figure than if I blended everything in nice and careful with all those different colors. That would be too soft an edge. So I wanted a slightly harsh lighting effect because of the strong light. So that's why I went with the layers. So at the end of the first pass of colours, my sort of base coats of pink and purple, that is what the figure was looking like. But of course at this point it's going to need some more shadows. So I jump in now and I start using grey on top of the pink. And I'm using a cool grey C3 Copic Ciao. And I'm putting that in. And you can see that as I add that cool grey, I'm leaving some areas that are pink. I'm leaving an edge that is pink or a glow that is going to stay pink. Because of course the light source at the middle of the figure, the energy ball it's holding, is going to hit this figure with this bright light and leave this pink edge, and that's what I was trying to achieve. And I decided to use Copic cool greys because they have much more of a cool blue quality to them than perhaps Promarkers when I did a tester. And the purple areas needed some extra shadow as well, so I add that using red-violet flex marker for the dark areas. And at this point, the Copic marker, the CG3, was beginning to get a little bit dry and a little bit run out. So I had to stop mid-drawing and do a refill. That's better. And now you can see that I've also put grey over some areas that I did completely pink first time around. And that's because even though those areas were going to be grey, I wanted them to hopefully have a little bit of a pink quality, a little bit of a pink glow underneath. So that's why I put the base layer of pink down, almost like when some artists do a painting and they put down a ground of a certain colour that covers the entire canvas or the entire paper first of all. I think that was the plan anyway. You can let me know in the comments whether that was successful or not. And here you can see me just adding those cool grey 3 areas to the rest of the figure now, being very careful to leave a lot of those pink areas showing. So I'm going to still get that pink glow across the entirety of the figure. So after my first pass at deepening all of the shadows, this is what the figure looked like. And you can see it's beginning to get a bit of depth and it's beginning to take shape, but it needs a bit more. So here you can see me adding Cool Grey 5. So this is a jump up to Cool Grey 5. And what you can see me doing is not only doing some straight up shadow areas that I know are going to be dark grey, but you can also see me sort of running along the edge of where the grey meets the pink. And the idea here is like putting this very strong shadow along the very edge of where 2 colours meet is to suggest that the light source is really strong and really stark as it strikes this kind of like white or grey figure. That was the idea anyway. I mean, I've looked at this technique by looking at some artists' work on Instagram and so on. And so I'm kind of adapting that style. So I might need a bit more practice with it to make it work absolutely completely. But one thing you can see me doing in the grey areas is doing those in normal kind of dark to light shading because I'm assuming that they're a little less shiny. So I'm going to do those in just like normal kind of shading style. So even though I haven't coloured in the big glowing magic ball that the Palkia is holding in the centre yet, that is what I'm thinking about with all of my lighting effects. That's governing everything. All the shadows that I'm putting in are based around the idea that that is going to be this very strong glow in the very center of the picture. And at this sort of halfway stage, I realized that perhaps the legs a bit further through the light source would have a bit more pink on them. So what you can see me doing here is going in with the Sorbet brush marker again, and I'm adding some more pink areas, making those pink areas a little bit thicker before I start then putting in the Cool Grey 5, the deeper, darker shadow areas. And again, I'm trying to keep those shadow areas along the edges, if I can, of the pink, so that you get that idea again of the sort of glowing effect. It's a little bit easier on their kind of shiny toenails to achieve that glow, I think. But I think there's definitely a sort of like element of having seen this effect, loving it, and then what I'm doing here is perhaps overdoing it and not fully understanding the way that it works. So that's why I might sort of go back to the drawing board with this kind of like really bright stark light effect at some point and do a few more testers and make sure that it's working the way I want it to. But after that pass, that's what the figure was looking like. More shadow, more depth, but still needing a few extra bits of pink that I figure I'll put on the arm sections. Now I start doing the glow, the magic sort of crackly electricity in the center. And for this, I'm just laying down a base layer of the sorbet again, so the magic from this thing in the center connects with the kind of colors that I've put on the figure. That's the idea. And the sort of outer layer of this magic, I'm doing just a solid color of the pink. Now as I do the ones that are closer to the center, closer to the main light source, you can see that I'm going around my edges with this sorbet, but I'm leaving the very center of paper white. So to try and sort of get the idea across that it's much brighter near the center and it's not quite so bright on the outer edges. Then I step up with my slightly risky pink Copic marker here. This is RV04 Shock Pink, and it certainly is quite shocking. And what you can see me doing with this one is when I'm on the outer edges of the magic, I'm using the brush tip a lot more thickly to put down some slightly thicker marks and thicker lines. But then as I get the magic that is closer to the orb in the center, I'm really using the brush tip super finely to get a very, very thin and very, very delicate edge to the magic to suggest that obviously the orb in the center is like super bright and glowing. So anything close to it is going to have a lot more white on it. But then as you go further and further away, the sort of outer edges of the magic glow are just going to be a lot more colorful and full on color and no sort of stark white areas. And it is the brush tip on the Copics that allow me to do this. I don't think I could do this at all with the bullet tips of some other markers. And after that pass of colours, that's what the figure was looking like, and I felt the need to make the figure stand out a bit more. So here I decide to go in with the Pentel brush pen and start to add some darker line widths and vary those line widths. So the brush pen allows me to do this more effectively than perhaps using the kind of fine line pens that I actually did the outlines with to start with, because of course by pressing down on the brush pen I can get a thicker line straight away, and by easing up on it I can sort of ease up and get a much thinner line. And I just felt like the figure needed to jump out a little bit more on the page, and I was hoping that perhaps by being able to put in some more black outlines here and change the width and the weight of them, that I would be able to emphasize parts of the figure more. You know, for instance, the hands and the gloves, using some slightly thicker lines there perhaps than on some other areas to really make it stand out. But I had forgotten one thing about using brush pen on Bristol board paper, and that is that it doesn't dry instantly. It kind of sits on the surface and takes a while to dry, causing a big fat smudge because I wasn't careful enough. So I thought, okay, don't get mad. Just continue doing the lines. Make sure you're working top to bottom and left to right so you don't smudge anything worse. And I just thought I could probably do something with that later. So I was just thinking, don't panic, don't panic. Then I decided that the figure didn't pop off the page enough, even with the black outlines. So here you can see me putting in a sort of a block, almost a small frame behind the figure using BV08 blue-violet Copic marker, a much darker purple marker, but still staying on a kind of purple spectrum. And I use that to block in a sort of big rectangular chunk behind the figure to hopefully make it jump off the page a little bit more. So there it is, pretty much finished. I won't lie to you, it was a little bit nerve-wracking halfway through whether I could get it done or not. But now that it is done, I'm kind of pleased with the finished product. But if you've got any advice for me as far as markers goes, please leave it in the comments below. And if you liked it that much, then don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and don't forget to like it and also share it. And speaking of sharing, I'm on a whole bunch of social media, and you can find me at any one of these points. And the handle or the name that I go by is gmassamart. Thanks so much for watching.